Hello, my name is Demon, and we are not playing that game today because this is episode 1.5. Um, Now, I considered throwing kind of a bunch of exposition at the beginning of the last episode, or the first episode, and decided against it and to just go with like Junko's actual story stuff. So, here's where all the exposition is going to be. First and foremost, why a solo game? Well, that one's easy. I've tried to run a Pathfinder podcast before. I spent about a year uploading probably a audio twice a week. I think I got to three times a week in some occasions. It wasn't great, and nobody listened. Hurting players or other people is kind of impossible. I came across a podcast called Me, Myself, and Die, which is way better than anything I'll ever create. So go listen to that instead. But provided you didn't just leave, um, the first season in that used the Mythic GM emulator, and I went, holy shit, I've got that somewhere. So I went through and looked through my library, and I found that, and I actually read the damn book, and I sent a message to my friend who gave it to me. It's like, hey, this is actually kind of awesome. And he says, I know. Then I spent 3 weeks trying to figure out which character I was going to try to play a game with and what system I was going to use. Now, it was probably always going to be either 5th edition or Pathfinder. I do have Fate, and I think I do have a couple other ones, but I'm not too thrilled with how they work, or maybe just how I've been able to run them. Eventually, I decided to go with Junko as my character. Now, it took a long time for me to figure out setting, and in the end, I actually just decided to go with the original setting she was built for. I first built her in 5th edition, but eventually decided that it would be a bit easier just to use Pathfinder. Pathfinder has a whole shit ton of extra rules and stuff like that that I can use. And while 5th edition is great for actual play stuff, this kind of format where I'm going to be doing everything online and editing stuff really works out with a crunchy system. So we're playing a modified Pathfinder game. One thing you'll notice, Junko starts out as a level 5 warrior, so she's an NPC class. She's not even a PC. One of the main reasons for going with Pathfinder is I have a bunch of like extra rules and whatnot that I've always wanted to try using. Players have never actually bothered with them, and yeah, I want to try to get into like organizations and mass combat rules. Yeah, I got the whole Ultimate campaign that's got like the whole Kingmaker stuff in it. And yeah, a whole bunch of random crap that I can actually use. Also, I have a bunch of like monster NPC books and whatnot. And those all work with Pathfinder, and I don't have jack diddly shit for 5th edition because I've only run one 5th edition game, and it was not my first system. So I only have the one bestiary. While I have no problem with a company putting out product that makes it money because that's how the companies stay in business, um, Paizo, I like Paizo's model better of hitting you with massive tons of actual stuff. D&D really seems to separate it out a bit, so you get less per $60 book or whatever it was. Um, so yeah, I just don't have as much 5th edition as Pathfinder, and honestly, a lot of the stuff that I use in Pathfinder just doesn't even exist in 5th edition. All right, I got about 2 minutes left before I got to run to work. It is like 3 a.m. It's 3:58 a.m. I got to leave at 4. That is another thing. I don't actually have any time to myself. I usually have a kid on me and other shit I gotta do. So the only time I actually have to record is like 3 a.m. in the morning, which also means I only have 5 hours of sleep and can't think straight. So yeah, that's not gonna go well. So I want to talk about Honoria and Junko. We're gonna start with Honoria first. So my first game, which happens to be the first one that was a podcast, because yeah, I dumped right in that. Well, I guess first game with online people. It'd be my second or third game. It's my first real campaign. One of my players wanted to be, well, I had built this world and I had put like an actual Asia type thing into it. One of my players wanted to be from there. And I said, okay. And we were playing way up other side of the planet from this place. Um, and I had three countries. There's technically four, but stuff. Anyway, we started a second campaign. I used one of the same players, and he chose to play another was a kitsune. And he chose Iteo as which is like one of the shitholes on that continent. It's the worst country you could possibly be from, which made sense for him to not be there. Um, anyway, they ended up towards the latter end of the campaign pulling a bunch of people from Iteo and putting them on the moon. It was, hey, the world's ending. No, you can't stop it. How do you survive it? And that was kind of their solution. So they went through the whole epic, high level D&D or Pathfinder stuff to do that. Um, which is why the people from Honoria, the culture, the general cultural ethnic group, are called Itaean. They are descended from the moon, which they're actually quite literally, brought down, descended, not actually descended from or genealogically descended from the moon. So that brings us into like the second world that I had created. And now I got to go to work, and I'll finish this tomorrow. So coming into the second world, the Honorians are a people unto themselves already. So where most cultures or most peoples are convergent, they come together, they form alliances. The Honorians are actually divergent. So they come together as, hey, we are this people, and over time they kind of entropy out into, yeah, we're not Honorians anymore, we're Italians, leave us alone. This gives them an incredible advantage. So they end up becoming a like massive trade empire, and it basically kind of think China during its age of exploration, except they didn't suddenly stop. They kind of become the Rome slash Great Britain of the world. And this is where we go into a player who is the same player who originally played all the other previous things. This time he wanted to play a tiefling. Oh, right. A tiefling Honorian, also called the Akumajin. The reason why there are so many tieflings in Honoria, and not the original Iteo, there was no tieflings in the original Iteo, is because the players had worked with a specific demon, and that demon ended up escaping the end of the world along with the Itaeans. So, yeah. Anyways, we're setting up the background for this character. He wanted to be, noble, who was basically ran away for reasons. So we went through, we figured out the noble family, um, figured out what kingdom he was from Honoria, and in doing that, we created a character or an NPC called Un. And I can't really talk about Junko without first going over Un. So Un has a horribly tragic backstory, and is was kind of there to be slightly antagonistic or eventually helpful to said player who created all this stuff. And this is where we get the Battle of the Bloody Plains, the double decimation, and the sent into slavery exile stuff. Now we're going to fast forward to a different game with a different set of players. This is the Tokolhalti Island. Now I don't actually have the maps or anything left over from that, and I've kind of changed the world up a bit for this new adventure here, so it doesn't really matter. But in this game, I wanted to have basically because Un worked really well in the previous game. However, Un was kind of dark and broody. So I essentially created another version of Junko, where the whole backstory was kind of normal, okay, everyday common stuff instead of just horrible, tragic bullshit. Now, Junko still ended up in the same battle, um, surviving it and being exiled. But Junko's not this broody kind of bitch. And I've thought about writing things or playing things with Un, but she's not a great main character. Junko, on the other hand, there is no way she doesn't end up trying to protect people and, like starting a mercenary or paramilitary type organization. I guess back to the world building. So in that second world, it would end in like kind of a god's war. In the death throes of the sentient races, the Enorians essentially ripped apart the barrier between worlds and realms and shit. So I've had like mini games where, or one shots where the Enorians invade Hell, and I have a setting where Hell has been taken over by humans mostly, and the other sentient races. And then I have this new world in which they evaded, which was just kind of this pristine, perfect world, and it was inhabited, but the locals were not terribly sophisticated. And that is where I put the setting of Honoria and Tokahalti Island and what in this particular case. So most of my games and stuff like that are all kind of just mishmashed all together. And it works depending on, which world I'm running at any given time. So I think that concludes the brief history of the world and how we got here and how I started playing this game. I think all that's left is to like go over Junko's particular stats. Now, this is going to be a heavily modified Pathfinder game, which works perfectly well for the crunch I have. I'm going to be using a lot of 5th edition rules, such as you can move, you can kill a guy, and then you can continue the rest of your move. Because there are things in 5th edition that make a lot of sense. Also, on many cases, I really like the advantage-disadvantage system of 5th edition. Though, for the most part, we're going to be playing with Pathfinder rules. One of the biggest changes, however, is going to be how armor works. Armor is now going to be damage resistance. It is not necessarily going to be AC. This should help with Pathfinder's whole miss, 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 because you're not actually missing, you're hitting the armor. And even before I had started 5th edition, or before I had heard about other ways of running armor, I'd always considered, hey, if it hits your touch AC, but it misses because of your full AC, then it actually hit you. It's just soaked by your armor. So in this case, armor will be damage resistance. Okay, let's see if we can quickly go through Junko's character sheet. I kept having to up her abilities until we got to a point buy of 15. Originally, I was going to keep it point buy at 10 because, that's a lower fantasy. However, all my materials have all the characters, including NPCs, at a point buy of 15. So I figured I better go back and change that. So strength 12, dex 10, con 16, int 14, wisdom 14, and charisma 10. So she's not very charismatic. She doesn't have a lot of dexterity. She also doesn't have a lot of strength, right? She's a smaller female. I mean, it makes more sense for the giant barbarian with muscles on his muscles to have the really high strength. Constitution, she is a soldier. She's gone through some shit. She's got a pretty high constitution. She's fairly intelligent and fairly wise, which puts her, which is good for a leadership position. Generally speaking, you'd want more charisma, but kind of like the idea that she's a little bit more gruff, I guess. This is, her class is Warrior 5. So the way I kind of run characters and NPCs and whatnot is they're usually an NPC class unless they've like done the work to get into the advanced classes or the PC classes. So she will be working on converting her warrior classes to fighter classes as she goes. Let's see here. Human. She's about 26, 5'3", 120. Those are just kind of pulled out of my rear end. I don't know how that scales up correctly. She's not a very big person. Okay, what else? AC 10 because she has no armor. Fort 7, Will 5, Ref 0, or it should be like a 1 or something. Skills. I put a point in climb because that makes sense. Then she has some points in diplomacy because she does actually have to talk to people. She's just not very charismatic. She has a point in heal because I figure there's some medical training. She has 3 points in intimidate, and these are ranks, so it kind of builds up. So she has a +8 in intimidate when we get through it. Continuing on with ranks, though, she's got 4 in perception. She's got 4 in profession soldier, 4 in sense motive, 1 in survival, and 1 in swim, because I figured those make sense. Total ranks, 24 of 10. The character she thinks she should only have that many. I wonder if that's wrong. Probably have to look into it. So, let's go in here somewhere. It tells me feats. All right, feats. She has Iron Will, Alertness, Persuasive, and Shield Wall, which is a teamwork feat. And that one's kind of important for. I forgot to mention that her archetype is Drill Sergeant. So Drill Sergeant gives you. Here it is, features, traits. Gives you Tactician at, I was at the, I don't know, second level, third level, somewhere in there. It gives you Tactician, which essentially gives you the Cavalier's Tactician ability, which allows you to, as a standard action, give everybody around you one of your teamwork feats. So essentially, she can take an action to give everybody some feat that allows them to all work together. And can I click on this? Oh, I can click on it, but will it actually tell me shit? Okay, here it is. So shield wall. Whenever you are wielding a shield and are adjacent to an ally wielding a shield who also has this feat, the AC bonus from your shield increases depending on your shield wall, depending on the shield wielded by your ally. So it's it's +1 for a light shield and +2 for a heavy shield, and there's a thing with tower shields. So that makes sense for a phalanx type fighter. And basically, she can everybody in her group who is all in a freaking line, she can yell out, and everybody gets bonuses to their AC. Now remember, armor is only working as damage resistance, so any bonus to your AC is actually a bit more powerful than it would be otherwise. So I guess here's my ultimate goal for the podcast. It's not really a podcast yet, but we're gonna try to get there. I'm gonna try to make a few episodes of this specific series. I'd like to get a website set up, get it so that it as actually a podcast, and it actually sends out to the various feeds. Then I want to set up like a Patreon or something. So and hopefully get some support. If I can get some support, then I can validate keeping a website up, or if I can make enough to make off the cost of the website, which they're not terribly expensive. And from there on the Patreon, I would probably like to start a second series. Now I've got a bunch of settings and a bunch of things, and that way I would have one that's free, one that's kind of just for the patrons. And by just for the patrons, I mean just for the patrons until I finish the free series, and then that one would start dissolving into the ones for the public. So that's kind of the goal or the plan. I don't know if it's going to work out. I'd have to become freaking internet famous or something. And this is a D&D podcast. The whole thing is super saturated. The only thing I got is, hey, I'm alone. and there are better solo podcasts out there. However, there's not many of them, and you can binge through them in about a week. Ask me how I know. I can't believe this 1.5 went like 20 minutes, so I'm just going to shut up now. Thank you for listening.